This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story of ultimate betrayal. What happens when a self-made millionaire, Dorian Pierce, decides his pregnant, devoted wife is no longer good enough? He dumps her, trading her for a younger, starlet actress, Serafina Dubois. He hands his wife, Leora, divorce papers, and a check so small it's an insult, telling her she's nothing. He thinks he's won. But he made one fatal mistake. He thought Leora Hayes was a nobody. He never realized he didn't just divorce a graphic designer. He divorced the sole heiress to the Vaughan Steele dynasty. And she's about to teach him what nothing really looks like. The chandeliers at Cipriani 42nd Street dripped light like liquid diamonds, but for Leora Pierce, they were just heavy, glittering weights. Each flash of a camera bulb felt like a small pop of nausea. At 6 weeks pregnant, the nausea was a constant, clinging companion. She kept one hand on her stomach, hidden by the folds of her modest, slate-grey gown, and the other plastered to the arm of her husband, Dorian Pierce. Dorian was electric. He was accepting the Tech Innovator of the Decade award, and his smile, the one that had once seemed so genuine, was now a blindingly white, perfectly calibrated piece of public relations. He was the CEO of Apex Innovations, the man who'd supposedly risen from nothing. Leora had been with him since the nothing part. She'd designed his first logo, coded his first buggy website, and packed instant noodles into Tupperware for his all-night sessions. Now, he was a millionaire 100 times over, and she was his wife, an accessory. Dorian Pierce, a true titan, the MC bellowed. Dorian squeezed her arm, a gesture that looked affectionate to the crowd but felt like a vice. "Smile, Leora. You look pale," he whispered, his voice a low, cold hum beneath the applause. She forced a smile as he ascended the stage. He launched into his speech, all humility and fire, thanking his team, his investors. He didn't thank her. He hadn't, Leora realized, thanked her publicly for anything in over a year. A wave of dizziness hit her. She needed air. Slipping away from their table, she pushed through a velvet curtain toward a service corridor. The sudden quiet was a relief. She leaned against the cool marble wall, taking her first deep breath of the night. And then she heard his voice, Dorian's voice. Not his stage voice, but his real voice, sharp and impatient, coming from a nearby alcove. "Sarah, I told you, it's handled," he hissed into his phone. Leora froze. Sarah, Serafina Dubois, the actress whose name was suddenly stapled to Dorian's in every page 6 column. "She's being sentimental," Dorian continued, and Leora's blood ran cold. He was talking about her. "I don't care. The prenup is ironclad. Marcus Thorne reviewed it himself. She gets the severance we agreed on, and that's it. She's a nobody, Sarah. She came with nothing. She leaves with nothing." A pause. Leora could almost hear the pout on the other end. "Yes, baby, of course. Just a few more weeks. I have to time this with the Miyamoto merger. Once that's closed, I'm a billionaire, and she's a memory. We'll be in Tokyo by Christmas, I promise. Now, I have to go accept my stupid award. I'll see you at the penthouse later." The penthouse. Their penthouse. Leora's vision tunneled. The floor seemed to tilt. He wasn't just having an affair. He was replacing her. Systematically. The prenup, the merger, the timeline. It was a business transaction, and she was the line item being zeroed out. She didn't remember walking back. She was just there, standing at the edge of the ballroom as Dorian, her husband, the father of the child she was carrying, walked off stage to a thunderous ovation. He saw her, and his triumphant expression faltered, replaced by a flash of pure annoyance. "There you are," he snapped, grabbing her arm again. "Where did you go? People were asking. You're making me look bad." "You're seeing Serafina Dubois," Leora said. Her voice was flat, dead. It didn't even tremble. Dorian's grip tightened. He pulled her, not gently, back into the shadows of the service corridor she had just left. The smell of industrial cleaner and stale champagne hung in the air. "Don't you ever make a scene!" He spat, his face inches from hers. The charming mask was gone. This was the real Dorian. "You're divorcing me." It wasn't a question. He actually looked surprised. Then he laughed, a short, ugly sound. "So you heard. Good. Saves me the trouble." He straightened his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo jacket. "Look, Leora, let's be adults. This," he gestured between them, "this isn't working. It hasn't worked for a long time. You were perfect for the climb, but we're at the summit now. You just don't fit." "I don't fit," she repeated numbly. "No. I need someone with ambition, with presence. Serafina understands the world I live in." "The world we built," she whispered, the betrayal of physical ache in her chest. "I built it," he roared, jabbing a finger at his own chest. "I did the work. You designed a few logos. Don't overestimate your contribution." The cruelty of it knocked the breath from her. This was the man she had loved, the man she had supported, the man whose child was growing inside her. "Dorian," she said, a new, desperate strength rising. "There's something you don't know. Something important." "What?" he sighed, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Is this about the Amex? I'm cutting it. You have until the end of the week to move your things out of the penthouse. My assistant, Julia, will forward you the papers from Marcus Thorne. It's all very generous considering." "Dorian," she said, louder this time, grabbing his arm. "I'm pregnant." He stopped. He looked at her, his eyes traveling down to her stomach, which was still flat. He looked back up at her face. There was no joy, no shock, not even anger. There was just calculation. A slow reptilian smile spread across his face. "No," he said softly. "No, you're not." "What?" "Yes, I am. I'm 6 weeks. I have the doctor's report." "You're conveniently pregnant," he sneered. A last-ditch, pathetic attempt to trap me. "You think I'm an idiot? I've been wearing protection for 6 months, Leora. We haven't even slept in the same bed in 2. It only takes once, Dorian. That weekend in the Hamptons, you were drunk." "Save it," he cut her off, his voice like ice. "It's a pathetic lie. And even if it's true, get rid of it. Or, if you insist on this little drama, I'll claim it's not mine. I will drag your name through so much mud, you'll wish you'd never been born. You have no idea the power I have now. You are nothing." He pushed her arm off him. "You have 1 week. Sign the papers. Don't make this ugly." He turned and walked away, re-entering the ballroom to a fresh smattering of applause, leaving his pregnant wife standing alone in a service corridor, her world reduced to rubble. The dream was over. The lie she had been living, that Leora Hayes, the simple graphic designer, could find real love, was dead. The next 3 days were a blur of systematic erasure. Her keycard to the penthouse was deactivated. The joint accounts were frozen. The American Express card was, as promised, declined at a bodega when she tried to buy ginger ale for her nausea. She was staying at a Residence Inn off the highway in New Jersey, a place with polyester blankets and a lingering smell of stale coffee. She had $4,200 in a personal savings account she'd kept from her freelance days. It was all that was left of Leora Hayes. The meeting was at the offices of Thorne and Harding, LLP, a glass and steel monstrosity on Park Avenue that screamed new money. Leora wore the nicest thing she had left, a pair of black slacks and a simple cream-coloured blouse. Her hair was pulled back. She looked pale, tired, but defiant. The conference room was on the 54th floor, overlooking Central Park. Dorian was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers. The shark from the phone call, Marcus Thorne, slid a portfolio across the polished mahogany table. "Mrs. Pierce," Thorne said, his voice a smooth, insincere baritone. Or rather, Miss Hayes. As you'll recall, the prenuptial agreement, signed 3 years ago, is quite clear. In the event of dissolution, you waive all rights to Mr. Pierce's current and future assets, including all holdings in Apex Innovations. Leora said nothing. She just stared at Dorian, who was pointedly scrolling through his phone. In accordance with Section 4B, Thorne continued, Mr. Pierce has agreed to a one-time severance payment in recognition of your companionship. He is prepared to offer you $50,000. $50,000. He was worth over $500 million and climbing. She had built his first website for free. "It's an insult," Leora said, her voice quiet. Dorian finally looked up, his eyes impatient. "It's $50,000 more than you're worth. You were a glorified intern, Leora. Take the money and go. Buy a small condo in, I don't know, Ohio." "And the baby?" Leora asked, her hands clasped so tightly on her lap her knuckles were white. Marcus Thorne cleared his throat. "Ah, yes, the alleged pregnancy." He slid another paper across the table. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. It states that you will not speak of Mr. Pierce, his associates, or Apex Innovations, publicly or privately. It also includes a clause that you will not claim paternity for any future dependents." "You want me to sign away my child's father?" she whispered, horrified. "I want you to take the money and disappear," Dorian snapped. "If you don't, that 50K vanishes, and I countersue you for emotional distress and fraud. I will paint you as a scheming, gold-digging whore who tried to trap me with a fake pregnancy. Who do you think Forbes will believe? Me or the girl I picked up from a coffee shop?" A new, cold presence entered the room. A woman in a razor-sharp crimson suit, her heels clicking with aggressive confidence. It was Serafina Dubois. She didn't even look at Leora. She walked straight to Dorian, kissed him hard, and perched on the edge of the table. "Is this almost done, darling?" she asked, pulling a compact from her purse. "We have the reservation at Per Se." Dorian's entire demeanor softened. "Almost, baby. Just clearing out the last of the trash." "Trash?" Leora stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Everyone looked at her. Serafina raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a look of bored pity on her face. "You really should have taken the deal," Serafina said, her voice light and airy. "It's more than I got for my first walk-on role. Some people just don't know their value." "Oh, I know my value," Leora said. The fog of shock and grief was finally burning away, replaced by a crystalline, arctic rage. She looked past the lawyers, past the actress, and straight at the man she had once loved. "You're right, Dorian. The prenup is ironclad. Leora Hayes gets nothing." Dorian smirked. "Glad we're in agreement. Sign the papers, Leora." "I won't be signing them," Thorne sighed. "Miss Hayes, I advise you." "My name," she said, her voice ringing with an authority that stunned the room, "is not Leora Hayes." Dorian rolled his eyes. "Oh God, are you having a psychotic break?" "My name is Leora Catherine Vaughan, and you," she said, her gaze locking onto Marcus Thorne, "are about to be disbarred for threatening the granddaughter of Atticus Vaughan." The name hung in the air. Thorne, the shark, went white, visibly white. His hands, which had been tapping a pen, froze. Dorian just looked confused. "Vaughan? Who the hell is Atticus Vaughan?" Seraphina, who read the society pages, let out a small, strangled gasp. "Vaughan? As in, Vaughan Steele?" Thorne was already scrambling, grabbing his own phone. That's not possible. We ran a full background check. Leora Hayes. Parents deceased. No assets. Graduated from NYU. "A very carefully constructed identity," Leora said, walking toward the door. "One I adopted 5 years ago, because I was tired of men who only saw a walking, talking trust fund. I wanted someone to love me. The real me. The nothing me." She smiled, a bitter, painful expression. "And I got you, Dorian. The one man who loved nothing, because it made him feel something." "This is a joke," Dorian said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Leora pulled out her own, simple phone. She dialed a single number. "Yes, Miss Leora." The voice on the other end was British, precise, and carried the effortless authority of old money. "Arthur," Leora said, her voice breaking just a fraction, the only crack in her armor. "The experiment is over. Please come and get me. And Arthur, bring the entire legal team. Mr. Pierce just offered me $50,000 to get rid of the Vaughan heir." She hung up. Dorian was on his feet. "What did you do? What the hell is going on?" Marcus Thorne was frantically typing Atticus Vaughan into his laptop. His face was a mask of pure terror. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Dorian, Vaughan Steele. They own half the cobalt mines in the DRC. They own everything." Leora looked at her husband. "Vaughan Steele, Dorian, is the primary supplier of the refined, high-grade metals for your new chip, the one your entire Miyamoto merger depends on." She turned to Seraphina, who looked like she was about to be sick. "And Perse? A lovely choice. My grandfather sits on their board. I'll be sure to have your reservation and your D-list career cancelled." She opened the door. "You wanted me to have nothing. You're right." She looked back at him, her eyes as hard and cold as the steel her family forged. "Because I have everything, and I'm about to use it to take all of yours." The black Mercedes-Maybach S680 pulled up to the curb on Park Avenue, a silent obsidian shark in a sea of yellow taxis. It was so out of place, it looked like a tear in the fabric of reality. When Leora walked out of the revolving doors, a man in a perfectly tailored Savile Row suit stepped out of the driver's side. This was Arthur Kensington. He was not a butler. He was the CEO of the Vaughan family office, a man who managed assets equivalent to the GDP of a small country. He was also the man who had, reluctantly, helped Leora disappear 5 years ago. "Miss Leora," he said, his face a mixture of profound relief and simmering rage. He opened the door, and Leora sank into the buttery leather. He touched you?" Arthur asked, his eyes catching a faint red mark on her arm where Dorian had grabbed her. "It doesn't matter," Leora said, the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving her trembling. "It will," Arthur said, his voice grim. He handed her a bottle of water and a small box. Inside was a satellite phone. "Your grandfather is displeased." "He's displeased I left," Leora said bitterly. "Not that I was." "He is displeased that the future of his dynasty was threatened," Arthur corrected gently as the car pulled silently into traffic. "He is also worried about you, in his way." The experiment, as Arthur called it, had been Leora's rebellion. After her mother's death, Atticus Vaughan, a domineering patriarch from the old school, had tried to forge Leora in his own image. He'd arranged her life, from her schooling to her future husband, a boring, blue-blooded European duke. At 22, Leora had fled. With Arthur's covert help, she had created Leora Hayes, a new identity built from the ground up, with a clean, if thin, backstory. She wanted to prove she could make it on her own, and more importantly, find someone who loved her, not her name. She met Dorian Pierce at a tech startup incubator. He was all passion, ambition, and energy. He had nothing. She had nothing. It seemed perfect. She'd fallen in love with his drive, and he, she'd thought, with her mind. Now she knew the truth. He'd only loved her submission. "Where are we going?" Leora asked, as the car bypassed the bridges to New Jersey. "The Vaughan Tower. Your suite has been prepared. Your medical team is on standby." "My medical team?" "You are carrying the next Vaughan, Miss Leora. We are taking no chances. The OB-GYN who delivered you, Dr. Alastair Reed, is flying in from Geneva." It was happening that fast. The world of Leora Hayes was dissolving, and the monolithic power of Leora Vaughan was reasserting itself. Back in the conference room, chaos had erupted. "You idiot!" Marcus Thorne was shouting, his professional veneer shattered. "You absolute, arrogant moron." "How was I supposed to know?" Dorian roared, throwing his phone against the wall. It shattered. She was a nobody. She wore clothes from the Gap. "She's the sole heir to Atticus Vaughan," Thorne screamed, pulling at his hair. "Vaughan Steel isn't just a company. It's a dynasty. They don't sue people, Pierce. They erase them. They own politicians. They own the supply chain. They own the mines." Serafina was frantically texting. "My agent just dropped me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He said he can't get involved with the Vaughans." "What does that mean? Dorian? What does that mean?" Dorian ignored her. He was pacing, his mind racing. "Fine. So she's rich. It doesn't matter. The prenup is valid." Leora Hayes signed it. "The prenup is toilet paper," Thorne countered. "She signed it under a false identity. That's fraudulent concealment. But guess what? It won't even get to court. She'll claim you were the fraud, that you seduced her, made her sign it, all while having an affair and planning to cut her out before the merger." "That's exactly what I did. Yes. And now the other side has, for lack of a better term, infinite money." "We're not in a legal battle, Dorian. We're in a war. And you just brought a pocket knife to a nuclear missile silo." A new team of lawyers entered the room. They didn't knock. They were led by a severe-looking woman in her 60s, flanked by 3 men who looked like they'd never smiled. "Mr. Pierce," the woman said, her voice like gravel, "I am Margaret Cole, of Sullivan and Cromwell, outside counsel for Vaughan Industries. You are to cease all contact with Ms. Vaughan. You are to make no public statements. You will find a hold notice on all your personal and corporate assets, effective immediately." "You can't do that," Dorian shouted. "We can," Margaret said, placing a thick file on the table. "This is a petition for an emergency injunction, citing marital fraud, emotional distress, and potential corporate malfeasance. We are also filing a separate suit on behalf of Vaughan Industries for, let's see, tortious interference with a key executive. That's you, Mr. Thorne, for threatening a pregnant Vaughan heir." Thorne sank into his chair. "And finally," Margaret continued, "we've flagged your Miyamoto merger for our partners at the SEC. We have concerns about the pre-merger valuation of Apex. It seems inflated." Dorian's blood turned to ice. He had cooked the books. He'd pumped the numbers just slightly to guarantee his billionaire status post-merger. "Get out," Dorian whispered, his voice shaking. "We're not finished," Margaret said. "Ms. Vaughan has requested one more thing." "Serafina Dubois?" Serafina jumped. "This is a cease and desist. You are to never speak Miss Vaughan's name. You are to stay 1,000 feet away from her at all times. And, yes, a personal note. Margaret pulled a small card. Your invitation to the Met Gala has been reallocated. Serafina let out a small sob. Enjoy your lunch at Per Se, Margaret Cole said, gathering her files. It will be your last. The lawyers left. Dorian and Serafina stood in the silent, $20 million view conference room. The life they had planned, the fame, the billions, the power, had just evaporated in less than 20 minutes. You, Serafina said, her voice dripping with venom, you ruined me. You told me she was nothing. Get out, Dorian said, deadly quiet. I'm not going anywhere. You owe me. Get out, he roared, sweeping a water pitcher off the table. Serafina fled. Dorian stood alone, panting, looking at the skyline. He wasn't just in trouble. He was finished. And the worst part, the most terrifying part, he had never, not once, seen this coming. He had poked a sleeping giant. And now it was very, very awake. For 1 week there was silence, a terrifying, oppressive silence. Dorian Pierce tried to live his life. He woke up in his penthouse, the sheets still smelling faintly of Serafina's perfume. But she was gone. After their blowout at the lawyer's office, she had vanished, her calls going straight to voicemail. A few days later, a TMZ alert popped up. Serafina Dubois checks into exclusive wellness retreat for exhaustion. Sources say she was duped by a powerful mogul. She was already spinning the story, already positioning herself as a victim. It was a smart move. It was a move he would have respected if he wasn't so furious. But Serafina was the least of his problems. The Miyamoto merger was his life's work. It was the deal that would elevate him from a mere tech millionaire to a global titan. It was set to close in 2 weeks. He sat in his Apex Innovations office, a sterile expanse of glass and chrome, trying to calm his investors. No, Bob. The valuation is solid, Dorian said into his speakerphone, forcing a jovial tone. It's just a rumor, a nasty piece of press from a disgruntled party. A disgruntled party that owns the entire rare earth mineral market, Dorian, the investor barked. Mr. Miyamoto himself is re-evaluating. He's spooked. I'll handle Miyamoto, Dorian said, ending the call and slamming his fist on his desk. He hadn't heard a word from Leora. Not from her lawyers. Not from her family. The injunction was in place, his assets frozen, but there was no lawsuit yet. They were toying with him. It was a power move, designed to make him sweat. And it was working. He called his COO, Ben. Ben, what is the status of the V9 chip? Ben's voice was strained. That's the problem, D. Our supplier for the refined cobalt. They just declared force majeure. What? On what grounds? A hurricane in their non-existent parking lot? Worse. They said their parent company just rerouted their entire Q4 supply to a priority client. They've breached the contract. We're getting nothing until February. February, Dorian. The merger will be dead, and we'll be bankrupt. Who's the supplier? Dorian demanded, though he already knew the answer. A holding company called Mid-Atlantic Metals, Ben said. Never heard of them. Find out who owns them, Ben, Dorian yelled. Find out now. Dorian hung up and stared at his screen. Mid-Atlantic Metals. It sounded so boring, so bland. He knew, with a certainty that chilled his bones, that if he dug deep enough, he'd find the name Vaughan on the letterhead. Leora wasn't just suing him. She wasn't just taking his money. She was dismantling his company, brick by brick, supply line by supply line. She wasn't attacking his wallet. She was attacking his legacy. A new email popped up. It was from the New York Post. "Mr. Pierce, we are running a story tomorrow about your divorce. Sources close to Ms. Serafina Dubois have provided interesting details. We are also running a rumor that your Apex valuation is fraudulent. We'd love your comment." He was being attacked on all fronts. His business, his reputation, his new relationship. It was strategic. It was coordinated. And it was brilliant. Meanwhile, in the penthouse suite of the Vaughan Tower, a suite that took up an entire floor and had its own private garden overlooking the city, Leora was not resting. She sat at a 20-foot rosewood table, Arthur Kensington at her side. Dr. Reed had confirmed the pregnancy was viable, though she was underweight and stressed. He had ordered rest. Leora had countered by ordering a team of forensic accountants. He inflated the Q3 projections, Leora said, pointing to a line on a spreadsheet that only Arthur's team could have acquired. He based the Miyamoto valuation on a projected 500,000 units of the V9 chip, knowing he only had the supply line for 100,000. "He's a gambler, Miss Leora," Arthur said. "He was betting on the merger closing, then using Miyamoto's capital to buy up more suppliers. He's a fraud," Leora said, her voice cold. "And he called me a liar." She took a sip of a specially prepared nutritional smoothie. The nausea was still there, but it was overshadowed by a white-hot, purposeful anger. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. "The supplier breach?" she asked. "Mid-Atlantic Metals, a Vaughan subsidiary, of course, has successfully rerouted all cobalt shipments to our new green steel initiative in Germany. Apex Innovations is, as you would say, screwed." "Good. And the SEC tip?" "Delivered anonymously this morning, along with this very spreadsheet. Mr. Pierce will be getting a call from them by Friday." "And Serafina?" Leora couldn't help but ask. Arthur permitted himself a small, thin smile. "Ms. Dubois is finding it difficult to book work. It seems every casting director, every studio head, owes your grandfather a favor. Her wellness retreat is, I believe, a Holiday Inn in Scottsdale. The one by the airport." Leora almost laughed. It was a strange, rusty sound. "She called me trash. Yes, the irony is palpable." Leora stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out below her, a glittering prize. Dorian's office was down there, a tiny speck of light in her constellation. He had thought he was a king, but he was just a pawn on a board he never even knew existed. "He tried to take my child's future," she whispered. "He tried to erase us." "He failed, Miss Leora." "No," she said, turning back, her eyes shining. "He hasn't failed yet. He's just falling. I want him to land." She looked at Arthur. "There's one more thing. The Vaughan Foundation Gala. It's next week, isn't it?" Arthur's eyebrows rose. "Yes. Your grandfather is expecting you to make your first public appearance." "Good. I want 2 invitations sent, one to Dorian Pierce and one to Mr. Miyamoto." Arthur looked confused. "Miss Leora, Miyamoto-san is already attending. He is your grandfather's guest of honor." Leora smiled. It was the first real smile in months. It was terrifying. "Exactly. I want Dorian to walk in, thinking he has one last chance to save his deal. I want him to see the man who holds his future in his hands. And then, I want him to see me." The Vaughan Foundation Gala was not a red carpet event. It was the event. It was held at the Frick Collection, a bastion of old-world art and even older money. There was no press line, no E-news cameras. The only photographers present were from Vogue and Town and Country, and they only took pictures if you asked them to. Dorian Pierce arrived, surprisingly, alone. He'd received the thick, cream-colored invitation, embossed with the Vaughan family crest, and had interpreted it as an olive branch. A mistake, a sign that they wanted to negotiate. He was, after all, still Dorian Pierce. He was still, technically, Leora's husband. He saw his target across the garden courtyard, standing near a Vermeer. Mr. Miyamoto, the CEO of Miyamoto Corp., a man whose quiet demeanor hid a samurai's decisiveness. "Miyamoto-san," Dorian said, plastering on his most charming smile. "A pleasure to see you. I was hoping we could clear the air." Mr. Miyamoto looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Pierce, this is a surprise. I know there have been rumors," Dorian plowed ahead, "and supply issues, all temporary. I can assure you, the V9 chip is—" "Mr. Pierce," Miyamoto interrupted, his voice polite but firm. "I am here tonight as a guest of Atticus Vaughan. I find it inappropriate to discuss business." Of course," Dorian backpedaled. "But Atticus, he's an impressive man. I'm hoping to meet him tonight, as his son-in-law, in a manner of speaking." Mr. Miyamoto's eyebrows shot up. It was the first genuine emotion Dorian had seen from him. It looked like pity? Before he could respond, the low murmur of the room ceased. All eyes turned to the grand staircase. Atticus Vaughan, a man who looked like he'd been carved from a mountain, stood at the top. He was 80 years old, in a flawless tuxedo, and radiated an aura of absolute power that made Dorian's tech bro charisma look like a child's parlor trick. "Friends, colleagues," Atticus's voice boomed, no microphone needed. "Thank you for supporting the foundation. For 30 years my family has built this legacy. But I am an old man. A dynasty is not just about the past, it is about the future. It is about succession." A knot of ice formed in Dorian's stomach. "I have been remiss in shielding my greatest asset from the world," Atticus continued. "No longer. It is time for a new generation to lead. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Vaughan Steel, the new chairwoman of the Vaughan Foundation, my granddaughter." And then she walked out. It was not Leora Hayes. The woman who appeared at the top of the stairs was a stranger. She was dressed in a custom-made Schiaparelli gown of deep emerald green, a color that screamed life and money. Her hair, once a simple brown, was now a rich auburn, styled in elegant, powerful waves. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, the famous Vaughan emeralds, jewels Dorian had only ever seen in history books. She was poised. She was magnificent. She was, very clearly, and very visibly, pregnant. This was Leora Catherine Vaughan. She descended the stairs, her hand on her grandfather's arm. Her eyes scanned the room, cool and appraising. She saw Mr. Miyamoto and gave him a warm, familiar smile. He bowed deeply. Then her eyes found Dorian. He was frozen, a champagne flute halfway to his mouth. He looked, he realized, like a fool, a cheap, imitation brand fool. Leora's expression didn't change. She didn't scowl, she didn't smirk, she just looked at him. It was a look of complete and total indifference, a look one might give a piece of furniture that was about to be reupholstered, and in that single, crushing moment, Dorian Pierce understood. This wasn't an olive branch. This was an execution. The room erupted in applause. People were surging forward, not to Atticus, but to her. "Leora, darling, you look radiant," a Rockefeller exclaimed. "The pregnancy agrees with you," a Lauder beamed. "We must discuss the new German initiative," a senator insisted. She was their queen. Dorian felt a phone vibrate in his pocket. It wasn't his. It was Mr. Miyamoto's. The Japanese CEO looked at his screen, then back at Dorian. "It seems, Mr. Pierce," Miyamoto said, his voice now devoid of all politeness, that the SEC has just announced a formal investigation into Apex Innovations for securities fraud. Dorian's blood ran cold. What? Now? My team has just forwarded me the press release. They have credible evidence of gross overvaluation. Our deal, of course, is terminated. You will hear from my lawyers. Miyamoto turned his back on Dorian and walked over to congratulate Leora, who greeted him with a kiss on both cheeks. Dorian was left standing alone in the middle of the room, a pariah. The whispering had started. He could feel the stares. The King of Tech was now a court jester, and he hadn't even known he was at court. He locked eyes with Leora one last time across the room. She raised her glass to him, a silent, final toast. You get nothing. His world, his company, his entire future, it was all gone, and it had been taken by the nobody he'd told to go live in Ohio. The fallout was not a storm, it was an apocalypse. The New York Times headline the next morning was "Steel and Silicon, the secret heiress and the tech CEO who betrayed her." The Wall Street Journal was less romantic and more brutal. Apex Innovations halts trading amid SEC fraud probe. Miyamoto merger collapses. Dorian Pierce was radioactive. He was locked out of his own company by the board he had appointed. The SEC had frozen every asset. The penthouse was seized as a corporate asset, bought with funds now deemed questionable. Dorian was, in a single 24-hour cycle, homeless. He found himself in the same residence inn Leora had stayed in, a cruel twist of irony he was too numb to appreciate. He sat on the polyester comforter, the TV blaring. And in a stunning reversal of fortune, said a perky MSNBC host, Dorian Pierce, once the golden boy of Silicon Alley, is now facing potential jail time. But the real story is Leora Vaughn. After 5 years of living in obscurity, the Vaughn heiress is back. She's pregnant, and she's in charge. Sources say she is already purging the Vaughn Steel board and pivoting the multi-billion-dollar company toward green energy. A new segment started. It was Serafina Dubois sitting with Diane Sawyer, tears streaming down her face. I had no idea, Serafina sobbed, clutching a tissue. He told me she was nobody. He told me their marriage was over. He preyed on me, Diane. He used me as a prop to hurt his powerful pregnant wife. He's a monster. I'm a victim. Dorian threw the remote at the screen. The victim was already negotiating a book deal. He was ruined, truly, fundamentally ruined. He had lost his company, his money, his reputation, and his mistress. He had nothing left to lose, except the baby. A desperate, insane plan formed in his mind. The child. The child was a Vaughn heir, his heir. If he could prove paternity, if he could sue for custody, he found her. It took him 2 days of casing the Vaughn Tower, but he finally caught her. She was leaving, not in the Maybach, but in a discreet black Range Rover. He ambushed the car as it waited at a red light, pulling open the back door. "Leora!" he yelled, lunging inside. Leora didn't even scream. Arthur, in the front passenger seat, had a hand inside his jacket in a millisecond, but Leora put a calm hand on his shoulder. "Dorian," she said, her voice tired. She was holding a file, her nails perfectly manicured. "Leora, please," he begged. He was a mess, unshaven, wearing the same suit from 2 days ago. He was the picture of the man she'd first met, the one with nothing. "Leora, I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I was arrogant. Please don't do this. It's already done, Dorian. No, not for us. I love you. I always loved you. I got lost. And the baby. Our baby. We can be a family. I don't care about the money. I just want you. I want our child." Leora looked at him. her gaze analytical, as if studying a bug. "You're pathetic," she said, with no heat. "You don't love me. You love the idea of my money. You don't love our baby. You see a lottery ticket. You think you can sue for custody and get a piece of the Vaughan trust." He flinched. She had read him perfectly. "You're right about one thing," she continued. "It is my baby. And I will not have your poison, your greed, or your pathetic ambition anywhere near my child." "You can't do that," he shrieked, desperation making his voice high. "I'm the father. I have rights." "Do you?" Leora asked. She opened the file she was holding and handed him a single piece of paper. It was a lab report, a fertility test. "From your last physical, 6 months ago," Leora explained. "Arthur's team is very thorough. You've been paying for a high-end concierge doctor. They keep excellent records." Dorian read the words. His eyes scanned the jargon, the medical terms, until they landed on the summary. Diagnosis: azoospermia. Sterility. What is this?" he whispered. "You've been sterile for at least 5 years, Dorian. Probably from that bad case of mumps you had in college. You can't have children. You never could." He looked from the paper to her pregnant stomach, his mind shattering. Then who?" "You're not the only one who can have secrets," Leora said softly. "When our marriage was dying, when you were pushing me away, when you were wearing protection, as you so charmingly put it, I was lonely, and I wanted a child more than anything." "Who?" he demanded, his voice a broken rasp. "He's a good man. Someone I knew before you. Someone my grandfather actually approved of. He's kind, he's stable, and he will be a wonderful father to our child." The light turned green. "You see, Dorian," Leora said, as Arthur politely but firmly began to push Dorian out of the moving car. "You didn't just lose a wife you never knew. You tried to disown a child that was never yours." Dorian fell to the pavement, the lab report fluttering in his hand. "You don't just get nothing, Dorian," Leora said, looking out the window as the car pulled away. "You are nothing. 6 months. In the grand, sweeping timeline of the Vaughan dynasty, it was the blink of an eye. In the accelerated, brutal world of tech and media, it was an eternity. The name Dorian Pierce had completed its parabolic arc, from obscurity to brilliance, and back to a new, darker obscurity. He was no longer a titan or a mogul. He was a cautionary tale, a byword for hubris. The trial was a swift and merciless affair. The media, scenting the blood of a fallen king, had descended. But Leora was absent. She gave no interviews, provided no tearful testimony. She let the data do the talking. The spreadsheets, the forensic accounts, the undeniable, black and white proof of his fraud. The SEC, spurred on by the most powerful private legal team they had ever encountered, had built an unassailable case. Dorian's last public appearance was at his sentencing. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by an ill-fitting, off-the-rack garment his public defender had procured. He looked grey. The charismatic fire in his eyes had been extinguished, leaving only the cold ash of defeat. He tried to speak, to offer a final, rambling apology to his wife, to the board, to his investors. But his voice cracked. The judge, unmoved by the theatre, read the sentence: 8 to 10 years in a medium-security federal prison. As he was led away in handcuffs, a single TMZ reporter shouted, "Dorian, what do you have to say to Leora Vaughan?" He just looked at the camera, his face a mask of hollow comprehension. He finally understood. He, the great innovator, had been nothing more than a bug in her operating system. And she had, with precise, algorithmic coldness, deleted him. He was, as she had promised, nothing. Seraphina Dubois, on the other hand, had clung to her relevance with manicured nails. Her tell-all book, My Life as a Lie, duped by a tech devil, was a minor success, a guilty pleasure read for a few weeks. She embarked on a low-rent media tour, appearing on afternoon talk shows and podcasts, perfecting her role as the victim. I'm a trusting person, she'd wept to a D-list reality TV host. He sold me a dream, and all I got was a nightmare. I'm just trying to pick up the pieces, you know? But the performance was too slick, the tears too timed. The industry saw her not as a victim, but as an opportunist who had made a bad bet. Her serious acting roles vanished. Her high-profile agent had dropped her for violating the Met Gala clause. She was left with the dregs of fame. Her last public sighting was on a billboard for a new reality show, Rehab Ranch, Scottsdale. The poster featured her in a designer bikini, angrily throwing a mimosa at a Z-list influencer. She had, in her own way, found her level. She was no longer an actress. She was a professional train wreck, a tabloid figure trapped in a different kind of prison, one of her own making. For Leora, the world was just beginning. She stood in the main boardroom of the Vaughan Steel Tower. It was a room that had been designed by men, for men. Dark mahogany, stern portraits of her ancestors, a lingering scent of cigar smoke and entitlement. Over the last 6 months, she had changed it. The heavy drapes were gone, replaced with smart glass that overlooked the city. The dark walls were painted a light, warm grey. The stern portraits were still there, but they were now balanced by vibrant modern art from female artists. The energy of the room had shifted. It was no longer a fortress. It was a headquarters. She was addressing the board. Her grandfather, Atticus, sat at the end of the table, not at the head. It was a symbolic change she had insisted upon. He watched her, his expression one of open, unfiltered respect. "Our future is not in legacy, Steele," Leora said, her voice commanding the room, her presence undeniable. She was dressed in a simple, sharp, dark blue dress. Her pregnancy was gone, replaced by a lean, focused energy. Legacy is just a nice word for obsolete. Our Q1 projections are strong, but they are based on a dying model. A hand went up. It was one of the old guard, a man named Blevins, whom she hadn't yet been able to oust. Ms. Vaughan, Leora. Green steel is a politician's fantasy. The cost, the retrofitting. We're talking about a $10 billion gamble. Leora smiled, a cool, precise expression. Mr. Blevins, a gamble is basing your entire future on a finite resource while ignoring the global legislative and consumer shift toward carbon-neutral manufacturing. What I am proposing, she clicked a button, and a complex series of data points filled the screen, is an investment. We are retrofitting the Pennsylvania and Ohio plants. We are investing $10 billion, not just in carbon capture, but in hydrogen-based forging. We will be the sole supplier for the top 5 EV manufacturers by 2028. We will not just be the biggest, we will be the only. We will set the standard for the next 100 years. She paused, her eyes sweeping over every face. Vaughan Industries will no longer be a relic. It will be the future. Any of you who see that as a gamble are welcome to tender your resignation. I will accept it by end of day. The silence was absolute. Even Blevins just nodded, sinking back into his chair. Atticus cleared his throat. A motion to approve the Green Steel Initiative, as outlined by our chairwoman. All in favor? Every hand, even Blevins's, went up. That evening, Leora was home. Her penthouse was not the cold glass box of her former life. This apartment, 3 floors above her grandfather's, was her space. It was warm, filled with overflowing bookshelves that held engineering textbooks alongside classic literature. The walls were covered in art she had chosen, and the air smelled of old books, fresh flowers, and faintly of baby powder. She walked past the open-plan living room where a man with kind eyes and dark, wavy hair was sitting on the floor reading a board book. "And the cow says, 'Moo,'" he said, in a gentle, aristocratic British accent. This was Alexander Torrington, the man her grandfather had approved of all those years ago. The Duke-in-Waiting she had run from. What she had run from, she realized, was the arrangement, not the man. After the divorce, after the dust had settled, she had reached out, not for a romance, but for a co-parent. He was, as she'd told Dorian, a good man, and he had been overjoyed to be a father, on her terms. Theirs was not a grand passion, it was a deep, respectful partnership. She smiled at him, and he smiled back, a genuine warm expression that held no agenda. "Tough day?" he asked. "Blevins is still a dinosaur," she said, "but he's a dinosaur who knows how to vote." She continued down the hall to the nursery. The room was a soft, pale blue, filled with quiet, smart technology that monitored the air and temperature, but also with hand-carved wooden toys. In the center, in a simple, elegant crib, her son, Julian Vaughan Torrington, was just waking up. She lifted him, and the scent of him, milk and newness, filled her senses, grounding her. He was solid, real. He gurgled, his tiny, perfect hand wrapping around her finger. "Hello, my love," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Did you have a good sleep? Did you dream of new worlds?" He stared up at her with a child's profound, unnerving wisdom. He was her why. The reason she had fought. The reason she was building an empire, not destroying one. Atticus appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane. He looked frailer than he had 6 months ago, but his eyes were sharper. He looked at Leora and his great-grandson, and a complex, unfamiliar emotion softened his face. "He looks like your mother," Atticus rumbled. "He has Alexander's patience, I think." Leora smiled, turning. "Which is good. He'll need it, dealing with us." Atticus walked slowly into the room. He placed a frail, strong hand on Julian's head. "I tried to build a fortress around you, Leora," he said, his voice quiet. "After I lost your mother, I thought the world was something to be defended against. I didn't realize I was building a prison. I was wrong." It was the closest he had ever come to an apology. "Your mother, she had that same fire," he continued, looking at a photo of a smiling woman on the dresser. "I was afraid of it, afraid the world would break her, so I tried to contain it. I almost made the same fatal mistake with you." He looked back at his granddaughter. "You have my steel, yes. I see that in the boardroom. But you have her heart. You've learned to use them both. The heart as your compass, the steel as your sword. It's a combination I never mastered." Leora looked down at her son. She thought of the men who had defined her life. Atticus, who believed power was an inheritance. Dorian, who believed power was something to be stolen. Alexander, who believed power was a partnership. They were all wrong. She held Julian closer, her son, her legacy. She had survived. She had protected her child, and she had, from the ashes of a devastating betrayal, forged something new. "We have an empire to run, little one," she whispered, walking to the great window, the city glittering like a conquered jewel box below them. "But we're going to do it our way." Power wasn't something you inherited, or stole, or even shared. Power, she realized, was something you created, And she was, in every sense of the word, a founder. Her new dynasty was just beginning. And that is how Leora Vaughn reminded the world that you should never, ever mistake a woman's kindness for weakness. Dorian Pierce thought he was a titan, but he was just a footnote in her story. She didn't just take her power back. She built an entirely new one, on her own terms, for herself and for her child. What do you think of Leora's ultimate revenge? Was it too much, or was it exactly what Dorian deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fires. If you loved this dramatic story of betrayal and triumph, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good revenge story. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more real-life dramas just like this one. Thank you for listening.